lonely millionaire CEO was crying at his wife's grave until two little girls appeared and said 3 words. Before we jump into this incredible story, please give this video a thumbs up. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. And don't forget to smash the subscribe button and share this story to your friends. Get ready for an amazing journey. The 45th floor of the Phoenix corporate tower buzzed with the kind of power that only vast fortunes could create. Michael Thompson sat at the end of the massive oak conference table, his cold blue eyes scanning profit reports while 12 vice presidents waited nervously for his decision on their latest business deal. The Riverside Corporation takeover. Michael's voice cut through the silence like a knife. 85 million. Close it by Thursday. No feelings. No second thoughts. Just ice-cold calculation that had built his empire from a small garage business into a technology giant worth $16 billion. At 47, Michael Thompson was the type of man who made other CEOs sweat at night. He could change entire industries with one phone call. But life hadn't always been this way. A memory hit him suddenly like they always did. Jessica, laughing in their tiny first apartment, a daisy in her golden hair as she tried to bake his birthday cake. "You know, Michael," she had said, those bright green eyes sparkling with joy, "true success isn't about how much money you have. It's about how many lives you touch with kindness." He had kissed the flower from her cheek and promised never to forget those words. That was 20 years ago, when love felt endless and tomorrow seemed full of hope. Sir William Davis, his chief financial officer, stared at him expectantly. The Henderson merger. Michael blinked back to reality, his face turning hard again. Approved. Next item. The meeting dragged on for another hour. Every choice worth millions. Every decision affecting thousands of people. Michael handled it all with the emotion of a chess player moving pieces on a board. When the executives finally left, he stood alone in his glass-walled office, 55 floors above the busy streets of downtown Dallas. His phone rang. Private line. Only 3 people had that number, and 2 of them were dead. "Mr. Thompson." The voice was shaky, uncertain. "This is Dr. Jennifer Martinez from Dallas General Hospital. I need to talk to you about your wife, Jessica Thompson." Time froze. The city below seemed to stop moving. The building's hum faded to nothing. Michael gripped the phone so hard his knuckles turned white. "There's been an accident, sir. Crash on Highway 35. Your wife was rushed to emergency surgery, but..." The doctor's voice grew soft and careful. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Thompson. We did everything possible." The phone slipped from Michael's hand, crashing onto the marble floor. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Dallas kept moving. Cars flowing like blood through the city's veins. People rushing with their small, urgent lives. But in that office, in that moment, Michael Thompson's world simply stopped. Jessica was gone. The woman who had kept him human when success threatened to turn him into a machine. The artist who found beauty in broken things and taught him that being vulnerable was strength, not weakness. The only person who could make him laugh until his stomach hurt and cry at sad movies without shame. When his secretary knocked an hour later, she found Michael standing at the window, staring at nothing. His face showed nothing of the storm destroying everything inside him. "Sir, should I reschedule the board meeting?" she asked quietly. "I need to go to the hospital," he said. What happened next became legend in the business world. Michael Thompson, the man who had never missed a day of work in 17 years, who had closed deals from his hospital bed with a flu, who had taken business calls during his own mother's funeral. That man disappeared for exactly 24 hours. He returned the day after Jessica's funeral, wearing the same black suit, carrying the same leather briefcase, walking with the same determined step. But something deep had changed. Where once there had been controlled ambition softened by Jessica's gentle influence, now there was only cold, mechanical efficiency. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson," his assistant said carefully. He didn't answer. He simply walked into his office, shut the door, and began drowning his grief in an avalanche of work and success. Because if he stopped moving, stopped conquering, stopped building his empire higher and higher, He might have to feel the gaping hole where his heart used to be. And Michael Thompson couldn't afford to be human anymore. 14 months. 420 days. 10,080 hours since Jessica's voice had filled their house with music and life. Michael Thompson had counted every single one. The Lakewood mansion stood like a monument to emptiness. 25 rooms, each one perfectly maintained by his cleaning staff, each one echoing with memories he refused to face. The baby grand piano Jessica had played on Sunday mornings sat silent, its black surface reflecting nothing but dust particles dancing in filtered sunlight. "Mr. Thompson, your dinner is ready," Maria, his housekeeper, announced softly from his study doorway. He didn't look up from his laptop. "Leave it on the counter." It was the same conversation every night for over a year. Maria would prepare meals that Michael barely touched, while he focused on business reports and takeover plans until exhaustion dragged him to bed at 3 in the morning. The corporate world whispered about his transformation. The Michael Thompson of today made his old reputation look gentle. He'd destroyed 4 companies, eliminated thousands of jobs, and gained another $3 billion in assets with the emotional involvement of a predator. Board meetings ended with executives leaving pale and shaken. But success tasted like ashes. March 20th. The anniversary arrived like a punch to the gut. Michael cancelled all meetings, sent his security team home, and dismissed his driver. For the first time in over a year, he would be completely alone. The drive to Peaceful Hills Cemetery took 42 minutes through Phoenix's gray afternoon rain. Michael's hands shook slightly as he parked beside the familiar iron gates. He'd only been here once since the funeral, the day they installed the headstone. Jessica Marie Thompson, beloved wife. She found beauty in broken hearts. The words he'd chosen seemed small now, standing before the polished granite that marked where his soul was buried. White roses, her favorites, lay fresh beside the stone. He'd arranged for weekly deliveries, though he'd never watched them being placed. "Hello, sweetheart," he whispered, his voice breaking on the word he hadn't spoken aloud in 420 days. The cemetery was empty except for a groundskeeper in the distance. No cameras, no board members, no one to see Michael Thompson's carefully built mask finally crumble. "I don't know how to live without you, Jessica." The words poured out, desperate and broken. "I don't know how to be human without you showing me the way." His legs gave out and he collapsed onto the wet grass, his expensive suit forgotten. For the first time since that terrible phone call, Michael Thompson wept. Not the controlled tears of a public figure, but the raw, devastating sobs of a man who had lost his anchor in the storm. "Everyone thinks I'm stronger now," he gasped between breaths. "But I'm disappearing, Jessica. Every day I become less of the man you loved. I don't know how to stop it." The rain fell harder, mixing with his tears, washing away over a year of built-up numbness. In that moment, surrounded by silence and memory, Michael realized he was drowning. Not in water, but in his own inability to feel anything except loss. He stayed until darkness fell, talking to the granite stone as if Jessica could hear him, as if somehow his words could bridge the impossible gap between life and death. When he finally stood to leave, his legs unsteady and his heart raw, Michael didn't know that tomorrow would bring the first ray of light into his endless night. He didn't know that sometimes salvation comes in the smallest packages, with the gentlest hearts, when we least expect it and most desperately need it. Michael wiped his eyes with his sleeve, embarrassed by his breakdown, even though no one had seen it. The rain had soaked through his wool coat, but he felt strangely lighter, as if Jessica's presence had somehow absorbed some of his crushing grief. He was turning to leave when he heard them. Soft footsteps on wet grass. Quiet whispers carried by the evening breeze. "Grandpa Joe would have loved these," a small voice said earnestly. Michael turned to see 2 identical girls, maybe 8 years old, walking toward a grave 4 rows over. They each carried small bunches of wildflowers. Dandelions, clover blossoms, and tiny daisies that looked like they'd been picked from someone's yard. Their dark curls were damp from the rain, and they wore matching red raincoats that seemed too big for their small bodies. twins, Emma and Lily, though he couldn't tell which was which from this distance. "Mommy says Grandpa Joe is watching us from heaven," the other twin whispered, carefully placing her flowers on the worn headstone. "Do you think he can see these?" "I think he sees everything," her sister replied with the absolute certainty that only children have. Michael should have left. Should have walked away and let them have their private moment with their grandfather. But something kept him frozen in place, watching these two little girls handle their grief with such gentle acceptance. Then one of them noticed him. "That man looks sad," she whispered to her sister, pointing toward Michael with the honest directness of childhood. The other twin studied him with serious brown eyes. "Really, really sad." They looked at each other in that way twins do, seeming to have an entire conversation without words. Then, with a determination that completely surprised Michael, they walked toward him. "Are you visiting someone you love?" the first twin asked, stopping a respectful distance away. Michael's throat felt tight. "Yes, my wife. We're visiting our grandpa," the second twin explained. "He died last summer, but Mommy says love doesn't die, even when people do." That's very wise," Michael managed. The girls looked at each other again, having another silent conversation. Then the first twin took a small step forward. "You look like you need a hug," she said simply. Michael's breath caught. When was the last time someone had offered him comfort without wanting something in return? When had anyone looked at him and seen pain instead of power? "Can we hug you?" the second twin asked, her voice soft but sure. 3 words. Such simple words, but they hit Michael like lightning, like the first warm ray of sunshine after an endless winter. He knelt down slowly, his expensive suit forgotten, and opened his arms. The 2 little girls stepped forward without hesitation, wrapping their small arms around his shoulders. They smelled like rain and childhood innocence, like hope and healing. For a moment that felt like forever, Michael allowed himself to be comforted by 2 strangers who saw his pain and chose kindness. The tears came again, but these were different. Cleaner somehow. Mixed with something he'd almost forgotten existed. Gratitude. "Girls. Lily." A woman's voice called from the parking area, touched with mild worry. The twins stepped back, smiling at Michael with a satisfied look of children who'd accomplished something important. "We have to go," one said. "But I'm glad we met you." "Me too," Michael whispered, his voice thick with emotion. They skipped back toward their mother, leaving Michael kneeling in the wet grass, something fundamental shifting inside his chest. For the first time in over a year, the crushing weight of loneliness had lifted just enough for him to breathe. As he watched them disappear into the evening, Michael realized he didn't even know their last name. But he was going to find out. Michael drove home in a daze. The twins' innocent faces burned into his memory. For the first time in over a year, he'd felt something other than crushing emptiness. Flicker of warmth. A moment when his heart remembered how to beat for something other than mere survival. That night he couldn't sleep. He stood in his study, staring out at the city lights, replaying those 3 simple words. "Can we hug you?" When had anyone asked permission to show him kindness? When had anyone looked past his wealth and power to see just a broken man who needed comfort? By morning, Michael had made a decision that would have shocked his board of directors. He was going to find those girls. Mr. Thompson, his personal assistant Karen, looked surprised when he called her into his office at 7 in the morning. "How can I help you?" "I need you to contact our security firm." Discreetly. "I'm looking for 2 girls, twins, about 8 years old. They were at Peaceful Hills Cemetery yesterday evening around 6, visiting someone named Joe." Karen's eyebrows rose slightly, but she'd worked for Michael long enough to know not to ask questions. "Any other details?" "Dark curls, red raincoats. They had a mother waiting in the parking area." Michael paused, feeling oddly vulnerable. "This is personal, Karen. Complete confidentiality." Within 48 hours, his investigators had their answer. Emma and Lily Martinez, age 8, students at Roosevelt Elementary. Their mother was Angela Martinez, 31, a music teacher at the same school. The girl's father, Carlos Martinez, had been killed in Iraq 5 years ago. They lived in a small apartment on Oak Street, barely making ends meet on a teacher's salary. Angela Martinez. Michael found himself studying the photograph his investigators had provided. She had the same gentle eyes as her daughters, the same dark curls. But there was something else. A quiet strength that reminded him somehow of Jessica, though they looked nothing alike. The report painted a picture of a woman struggling with grace. Angela taught music to elementary students while giving private violin lessons in the evenings to make rent. She volunteered at the food bank, organized events for military families, and somehow managed to raise 2 daughters who had the compassion to comfort a stranger in a cemetery. Michael found himself driving past Roosevelt Elementary during lunch breaks, parking across the street where he could watch the playground. He felt foolish, but he couldn't help himself. There was something about that family, something about the peace he'd felt in that brief moment, that he desperately needed to understand. On Friday afternoon he saw them. The twins were playing on the swings while Angela watched from a bench, grading papers. Even from a distance, Michael could see her patient conversations with other children. The way she settled arguments with gentle words. How she automatically reached out to tie a loose shoelace or bandage a scraped knee. Jessica would have been like that with children, he realized. They talked about having kids someday when the business was more stable, when they had more time. Someday had never come. Sir. His driver's voice startled him back to reality. Should we return to the office? Michael stared across the street at Angela Martinez, watching her help Emma and Lily collect their backpacks as the school day ended. This woman had something he'd lost. The ability to find joy in simple moments, to give love freely without calculation or expectation. He needed to understand how she did it. More than that, he needed to thank those little girls properly for giving him the first moment of peace he'd felt since Jessica died. But how do you approach a struggling single mother and explain that her daughters had saved your soul in a cemetery without sounding completely crazy? 4 days of watching from a distance had given Michael plenty of time to rehearse his approach. But when the moment finally came, every carefully planned word vanished from his mind. Angela Martinez sat on a park bench while Emma and Lily played on the nearby playground, their laughter floating on the afternoon breeze. Michael had followed them here after school, his heart pounding like a teenager working up courage to ask someone to prom. "Excuse me," he said, approaching slowly so as not to frighten her. "Mrs. Martinez." Angela looked up from the book she was reading, her brown eyes immediately cautious. A well-dressed stranger knowing her name would make any single mother nervous. "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" Michael's mouth went dry. How did you explain something like this without sounding like a complete lunatic? "My name is Michael Thompson. This is going to sound strange, but I met your daughters 4 days ago at Peaceful Hills Cemetery." Recognition dawned in Angela's eyes, followed by understanding. "You're the man from the cemetery. The sad man. They told you about me." Angela's posture relaxed slightly, though she remained careful. "They came home talking about the sad man who was visiting his wife. They were worried about you." She paused, studying his face. "Emma asked me if people can die from being too sad." The simple statement hit Michael like a physical blow. Those little girls had been concerned about him. A complete stranger. Enough to go home and worry about his well-being. "I wanted to thank them," Michael said, his voice rough with emotion. "What they did. I can't explain it properly, but it was exactly what I needed in that moment." "They have their grandfather's heart," Angela said softly. "Joe always said that kindness was the most important gift we could give." "Your father-in-law?" "Carlos's father. He helped raise the girls while I worked. When we lost him last summer." Angela's voice trailed off, but she didn't need to finish. Michael understood the weight of layered loss. "I'm sorry for your losses," he said, and meant it in a way he'd never meant condolences before. "Thank you." Angela closed her book, giving him her full attention. "The girls will be thrilled to know you're okay." They've been asking about you every day. Michael felt something crack open in his chest. They have. Emma wanted to go back to the cemetery to check on you. I had to explain that we couldn't just show up at someone else's private moment. Angela smiled, and Michael saw where the twins got their warmth. But she made me promise to pray for the sad man and his wife. The tears came without warning. Not the devastating sobs from the cemetery, but quiet tears of gratitude and something he'd almost forgotten. The feeling of being cared for by someone who wanted nothing from him. "I'm sorry," he said, wiping his eyes. "It's been a difficult year. Don't apologize. Grief doesn't follow anyone else's schedule." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the twins play. Michael found himself talking about Jessica. Not the cleaned-up version he gave at board meetings when people offered sympathy, but the real Jessica who hogged blankets and burned toast and made him laugh until his sides ached. "She sounds wonderful," Angela said when he finished. "She was. She would have loved your daughters." Angela smiled. "They're performing in the school concert next week. Nothing fancy, just songs they've been practicing, but they're so excited." She hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Would you like to come? I think they'd be happy to see you there." Michael felt something he hadn't experienced in over a year. Anticipation for a future moment. "I'd like that very much." The Roosevelt Elementary auditorium hummed with the excited chatter of parents armed with smartphones and homemade programs. Michael sat in the back row, his tailored suit and expensive shoes making him stand out like a diamond among pebbles. Mothers in comfortable jeans whispered about bake sale goals while fathers compared soccer schedules. He didn't belong here. "Mr. Michael." Emma's voice cut through the crowd as she spotted him from backstage. She waved enthusiastically, her face lighting up with pure joy. Lily appeared beside her twin, both girls beaming as if he were a movie star. Several parents turned to see who had captured the Martinez twins' attention, their expressions curious and slightly suspicious when they saw the expensive stranger. Angela appeared moments later, elegant in a simple green dress that probably cost less than Michael's tie. "I'm so glad you came," she said, settling into the seat beside him. "The girls have been talking about nothing else." The concert began with kindergartners singing off-key versions of classic children's songs. Michael found himself genuinely smiling for the first time in months, watching the pure joy on tiny faces. When Emma and Lily took the stage with their third-grade class to perform "This Land Is Your Land," Michael felt his throat tighten with unexpected emotion. They sang directly to him, their eyes bright with the knowledge that someone special had come just to hear them. It was a gift more precious than any corporate victory he'd ever celebrated. After the concert, the twins rushed to him with typical 8-year-old enthusiasm. "Did you hear us sing?" Lily asked, bouncing on her toes. "We practiced every day," Emma added. "Mama said you might come, and we wanted to be perfect." Michael knelt down to their level. "You were both absolutely wonderful. Better than any concert I've ever attended." The next morning, Michael's driver delivered 2 large packages to the Martinez apartment. Inside were professional keyboards, the kind that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Each came with a note. "For 2 very special musicians. Thank you for sharing your gift, Michael." His phone rang an hour later. "Mr. Thompson, this is Angela Martinez." Her voice was gentle but firm. "I need to return these keyboards." Michael felt confused. "Is there something wrong with them? I can exchange them for different models. They're beautiful and incredibly generous, but I can't accept them." "I don't understand. Don't the girls deserve nice instruments?" "They have instruments. We have an old piano at home that my grandmother left us. It's not fancy, but it makes music just fine." Angela paused. "Mr. Thompson, can I ask you something? What did you want to be when you were 8? The unexpected question caught him off guard. I wanted to be an astronaut, I think." "Did you need a real spaceship to dream about space?" Michael began to understand. "No. A cardboard box worked fine. The girls don't need expensive keyboards to love music. What they need is someone who shows up, who listens to them sing, who claps when they finish. Her voice softened. What they need is what you gave them last night. Your time and attention. After hanging up, Michael sat in his office staring out at the city. For decades, he'd solved every problem with money, fixed every relationship with expensive gifts. But Angela was teaching him something Jessica had tried to show him years ago. That the most valuable things couldn't be purchased. That evening, instead of sending gifts, Michael called Angela. Would it be okay if I came over tomorrow? Maybe I could hear them practice on that old piano you mentioned. They'd love that, Angela said, and Michael could hear the smile in her voice. For the first time since Jessica's death, Michael looked forward to tomorrow. The following Saturday, Angela suggested a picnic in Central Park. The girls love feeding the ducks, she explained, and it's easier to talk while they're distracted. Michael arrived with a simple basket from the deli near his office. Sandwiches, fruit, and juice boxes. No caviar, no champagne. Just normal picnic food that made Angela smile with approval. The twins ran ahead to the pond while Michael and Angela spread a blanket on the grass. For a few minutes, they watched Emma and Lily argue over who could throw breadcrumbs farther, their giggles carrying on the spring breeze. They remind me so much of their father, Angela said suddenly, her voice soft with memory. Carlos had that same competitive spirit, but he never let it turn mean. He'd turn everything into a game. Michael sensed the opening she was offering. Tell me about him. Angela was quiet for a moment, watching her daughters. We met in college. He was studying engineering, I was in the music program. He used to joke that he built things and I made them beautiful with sound. She smiled, but Michael could see the old pain behind it. He enlisted after September 11th. Said he had skills the army needed, and he wanted to make a difference. How long was he deployed? 2 tours. Iraq. Angela's voice caught slightly. The girls were so little when he left for the last time. Emma and Lily were barely 4. They hardly remember him now, which breaks my heart. Carlos was supposed to come home in 3 weeks. We had plans, a second honeymoon, maybe trying for another baby. Then the chaplain showed up at my door. Michael felt the familiar ache of sudden loss. The way life could change in a single moment. I'm sorry, Angela. That kind of pain. It never really goes away, does it? No, but it changes. At first, it was this crushing weight that made it hard to breathe. Now it's more like a permanent shadow. Always there, but I've learned to live with it. She looked at him directly. How did you meet Jessica? The question caught Michael off guard. He rarely talked about the early days, before money and success complicated everything. Arizona State University. I was a computer science major, working 4 jobs to pay tuition. Jessica was studying art. She had this old film camera that was probably worth more than my car. He smiled at the memory. I literally ran into her coming out of the library. Knocked her camera bag right out of her hands. Sent film rolls everywhere. Love at first collision, Angela teased gently. Something like that. I was mortified, scrambling around trying to collect her film, apologizing like crazy. But Jessica just laughed. She said anyone that worried about fixing a mistake was worth getting to know. Michael's voice grew warm with remembering. She was taking pictures of ordinary things. Fire hydrants, cracked sidewalks, people waiting for buses. She saw beauty everywhere. I only saw problems to be solved. Mr. Michael. Emma came running over, Lily close behind. Tell us more stories about when you were little. And about Jessica, Lily added, settling cross-legged on the blanket. Was she pretty? Michael looked at these 2 little girls, so eager to hear about people they'd never met, and felt something profound shift in his chest. When had anyone been genuinely interested in his memories? Not his business deals or net worth. She was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, he said seriously. But more than that, she made everyone around her feel beautiful too. As the afternoon wore on, Michael found himself sharing stories he hadn't told in years, while Angela added her own memories of Carlos. The twins listened with rapt attention, asking questions and begging for just one more story. Watching Angela's face as she spoke about her husband, seeing how naturally she included Michael in this intimate sharing, he realized something remarkable was happening. Their grief had created a bridge between them. Not romance, but something deeper. Understanding without explanation, acceptance without judgment. For the first time since Jessica's death, Michael didn't feel completely alone. Monday morning brought Michael back to the familiar steel and glass tower of Phoenix Technologies. But everything felt different now. The 45th floor seemed colder. The oak conference table more imposing. The faces around it more calculating than he remembered. The Sterling Industries acquisition, William Davis announced, sliding a thick folder across the table. 73,000 employees, mostly manufacturing. We can streamline operations, eliminate redundancies, and boost quarterly earnings by 22%. Michael flipped through the documents, his eyes scanning numbers that would have excited him just weeks ago. Sterling Industries, a family-owned company that had survived 4 recessions by caring for its workers. The kind of place where employees stayed for decades, where benefits included college funds for workers' children. Projected job losses? Michael asked quietly. William didn't hesitate. Approximately 52,000 positions. We'll keep the profitable divisions, sell off the rest. Clean and efficient. 52,000 people. Michael found himself thinking about Angela, struggling on a teacher's salary, working extra hours for violin lessons just to pay rent. About families like the Martinez family who understood what it meant to struggle. The board expects your approval by Friday, William continued. With your signature, we'll control 75% of the Southwest manufacturing sector. 6 months ago, Michael would have signed without a second thought. 52,000 jobs were just numbers on a spreadsheet, acceptable losses in the game of corporate dominance. But now he kept seeing faces. Emma and Lily asking if people could die from being too sad. Angela explaining that kindness was the most important gift they could give. What's the timeline for implementation? Michael asked. Layoffs begin immediately after acquisition. We'll announce it as operational restructuring to minimize negative publicity. William leaned forward eagerly. Michael, this deal puts us in the stratosphere. We'll be untouchable. Michael closed the folder and pushed it back across the table. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable. No. William blinked. Excuse me. I said no. We're not proceeding with this acquisition. The conference room erupted in confused murmurs. CFO William Davis stared at Michael as if he'd just announced his plans to give away the company. Michael, you can't be serious. This is a billion-dollar opportunity. To destroy 52,000 livelihoods for profit we don't actually need. Michael stood up, his decision crystallizing with each word. Find me deals that create jobs, not eliminate them. Find me opportunities that build communities instead of destroying them. What the hell has gotten into you? William's professional mask cracked. Ever since you started spending time with that teacher and her kids, you've been making decisions with your heart instead of your head. The room went dead silent. Michael felt every eye on him, waiting to see how he'd respond to such a direct challenge to his judgment. My personal life is not up for discussion, Michael said evenly. My business decisions stand on their own merit. Business decisions. William laughed harshly. You're letting emotion cloud a 9-figure deal. The board won't stand for this kind of instability. The word hung in the air like a threat. Michael recognized it for what it was. William positioning himself as the voice of reason against a CEO who'd lost his edge. Meeting adjourned, Michael said quietly. We'll reconvene when I have alternatives that don't require destroying lives for profit. As the executives filed out, whispering among themselves, Michael remained seated, staring out at the city below. Somewhere out there, Angela was teaching children to love music, and twin girls were learning that kindness mattered more than power. Maybe William was right. Maybe he was losing his business instincts. But for the first time in his life, Michael Thompson didn't care about being ruthless. He cared about being human. 6 months after William Davis's boardroom challenge, Michael stood in the converted warehouse in downtown Phoenix that housed the Jessica Foundation. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating children's laughter as they attended free music lessons, got homework help, and played in safe spaces while their parents worked. The foundation had grown beyond his wildest dreams. What started as a $150 million endowment had become a network of community centers across Arizona, serving thousands of single-parent families. The Richardson family just got their housing assistance approved, Angela told him, reviewing applications at her desk. As the foundation's director of family services, she had transformed from struggling teacher to advocate for families just like her own. Michael smiled, watching Emma and Lily help younger children with their reading in the next room. At 9 years old, the twins had inherited their mother's gift for seeing who needed help. And the Martinez Scholarship recipients. 12 kids heading to college this fall, fully funded. Angela's eyes sparkled with pride. Including Maria Santos. Remember her? The girl whose mom cleans offices at night to pay rent. Michael did remember. Maria reminded him of Angela at that age. Brilliant, determined, held back only by circumstances beyond her control. His phone buzzed with a text from Phoenix Technologies' new CEO, Janet Chen. Q3 profits up 18%, employee satisfaction at all-time high. The ethical business model is working beautifully. Michael had stepped down as CEO 8 months ago, staying on only as chairman while he focused on the foundation. The business world had predicted disaster, but Janet's leadership had proven that companies could be both profitable and principled. "Daddy Michael," Lily called from across the room, using the name that still made his heart soar every time he heard it. "Come see Emma's painting." Michael looked at Angela, who nodded with an amused smile. They'd been married for 6 months now, a simple ceremony in this very warehouse surrounded by the families they served. Emma and Lily had insisted on being both flower girls and official happiness monitors, a job they took very seriously. "What did you paint, sweetheart?" Michael asked, kneeling beside Emma at her easel. "It's you and Mama and me and Lily and Daddy Carlos and Jessica," Emma explained seriously, pointing to figures in the colorful scene. "See, we're all together at the picnic, and the angels are watching from the clouds." Michael's throat tightened as he studied the painting. In a 9-year-old's perfect logic, love didn't end with death. It expanded to include everyone who mattered. "It's beautiful, Emma. Should we hang it in our kitchen at home?" "Yes, right next to Lily's photo of us feeding the ducks." That evening, as they walked through the foundation's main hall, Angela slipped her hand into Michael's. Around them, families were finishing dinner in the community dining room, kids were completing homework in the study center, and teenagers were practicing music in soundproof rooms. "Remember what you told me once?" Angela asked. "About Jessica saying that success was measured by how many hearts you touch." Michael nodded, watching a grandmother teach her grandson to play chess at a nearby table. "I think she'd be proud," Angela continued. "Not just of the foundation, but of who you've become." Through the tall windows, Michael could see the Phoenix skyline where he'd once ruled from a glass tower, measuring worth in stock prices and acquisition targets. That man felt like a stranger now. "I never thanked them properly," Michael said suddenly. "Who?" "Emma and Lily. For saving my life that day in the cemetery." Angela smiled. "They know. Children don't need thank you speeches. They need love, attention, and someone who shows up every day. You've given them that." As if summoned by their conversation, the twins appeared, wearing matching pajamas and carrying their favorite bedtime books. "Story time," they announced in unison. "Whose turn to pick tonight?" Michael asked. "Mine," Lily declared. "I want the one about the sad king who learned to be happy again." "That's every story you pick," Emma pointed out. "Because it's the best story. It's our story." Later, after the girls were asleep and Angela was grading papers at the kitchen table of their modest home in central Phoenix, Michael stood in his study, looking at the framed photo.